Hey guys, hope you're doing well. It's the Oil Mutt here. Got a great question about lease operating statements. Some are called lease operating expenses. They are pretty much the same, but they're all different. This is just an example. If you'd like a copy of this, email me at theoilmutt@gmail.com. Again, that's theoilmutt@gmail.com. It is below. You can get a copy of this. There's a disclaimer at the very top I put in it. I am not an accountant, a lawyer, or any kind of expert. Always check with them. But this is just to kind of get your brain flowing and how all this stuff works. And more importantly, if you're looking at buying some oil wells, you have a general idea of what you're looking at when you look at an LOS. So this is very basic. You got the months here and then the costs here. Pretty straightforward. On your production, what you produce and what you actually sell are two different things. If you produce 100 barrels in a month, you're not necessarily going to sell a whole load. Most loads go 160, 170 barrels per load. So you're not necessarily going to sell a load in a month. But you want to make sure over here it's producing. So you put your production in, but then your actual revenue may be different. So that's one of those deals you just have to kind of wait and see. Um, but that's what this section is here. The royalty interest, all that fun stuff. We're going to get into it in another video because there's a lot of nooks and crannies in with overriding royalty interest, working interest, all that fun stuff. Next is your taxes. Again, you need to talk to an accountant. Every state is different. Marginal wells, quote unquote, stripper wells, lower producing wells, a lot of the taxes are voided so that people will actually produce them and not leave them with the state to plug. That's a big thing in Texas. Texas has a very good orphan well program, and one of the reasons why is that they drop the taxes on lower producing wells so they don't get stuck with them. We make another video about that. I'm not going to get too far into it. One thing on this though, I will say, typically your gas, what you produce and what you sell is about the same because it's going directly into a pipeline. There's exceptions to the rule, but normally your gas revenue will be right in line with the gas you produced. So, um, anyways, let's get into this. Surface expenses, right here, this bad boy. Now, if you do not have in-house roustabouts, in-house workers, all that stuff, a lot of this stuff will not mess with you. Like this whole section right here, labor, payroll, all that fun stuff you ain't got to worry about. What you will have is roustabout and pumper costs typically, workover costs, things of that nature. So location, cleanup, and damages. Location and cleanup is a constant deal. I really tried to keep the land clean. Um, every once in a while you have, oil on the ground around a pumping unit. I like to clean that up. You could have a tank overflow, get it cleaned up. But whenever you have that done, if you got to haul the water off, whatever it may be to clean up, that usually comes in right here. Your contract pumper, gauging, those guys check the wells almost every day. Usually you're about $150 to $300 a well. That's generally right where it goes. Those guys are kind of your, almost think of them like a maintenance man at an apartment complex. Like they're on the ground every day checking everything. They are a contract, and typically if you find a good one, you want to pay them a little bit more to keep them around because they are highly sought after. Um, and there's a lot of bad pumpers out there. So you really have to, you can make a whole video on pumpers. Maybe check out Andy Lloyd. He's got a channel. He's out in the Permian. He does pumping. He's got his own wells. Can really dive into all of the pumping details. Electricity is another one. Your electricity cost is one of your biggest costs, usually, whether it be pulling the oil and fluid out of the ground or injecting the fluid back. Electricity is typically one of the biggest line items as far as surface costs. Paraffin, hot oiling. If you deal with paraffin, that can always be a problem. And again, I'm going to try not to get into all this. I just want to kind of give you a general overview of the LOS, and we can make more videos diving into the actual stuff with this. Equipment rental, if you need a generator to power the pumping units. Pump jack rentals, if you're not, typically stuff I see, you don't rent the pumping units, but I guess on some of the bigger ones you could. Contract labor, roustabouts, that kind of stuff. Consultants, transportation, vacuum truck, water hauling if you got to haul off the water, water injection, electrician maintenance. That can be a big one if you have an electrical storm come through and bust everything up. That happens. And let's see what else. And there's a lot of stuff here. And again, email me at theoilmutt@gmail.com and I'll send this over to you. You can take a look at it, check it out, because there's a lot of stuff here. Measurement, inspection. Typically with inspections you don't necessarily have to pay. Now if you have to do state required inspections, obviously you got to pay for that. Gathering fees, that's another big one. The guys that buy your oil, they don't work for free, so typically $3 or $4 per barrel is what they charge. On your natural gas, that can be totally different, and I'm not a big natural gas guy, so check with the natural gas guy on what they charge. They have to take nitrogen out. Typically the gas will take a bigger hit, all that fun stuff. Welding, you don't use a lot of welding, but it when it rains it pours. Like with clients, I think we've used a welder like 15 times in the last 2 months and didn't use them at all the year prior. So welding is typically in the smaller towns. You can get stuff welded real cheap. Just go around town and say, hey, anybody know a welder? And usually a guy would come out with it on the back. Always be careful welding around oil and gas stuff for obvious reasons. Make sure the guy knows what he's doing in the oil field. You don't want him blowing up. Water disposal expenses, those are another big one if you don't have in-house in-house injection. And let's see, electricity bill, tank farm. A lot of this stuff is really getting into it deep. Keep it on there just in case, but in general, shouldn't have any issues with that unless you're sharing tank farms and commingling, and that could be a whole nother ball of wax. So we won't dive into that too hard. Next, subsurface costs. You've got your pumps, you've got your tubing, you've got your rods. Check out some of my other videos on what those look like. Stimulation, you always hear, hey, hit it with something and maybe it'll do better. Acid jobs, all that kind of stuff. So you put the expense in here. Inspection, typically whenever you do an acid job, or like me personally, if you go back in the hole, like if you pull everything out, I like to have what's called tubing testing, where they go and they pressure up the tubing. I think I've got a video of that. It's just a tubing testing truck, and they pressure up the tubing, make sure it's good. Well servicing, swabbing. Don't see a lot of swabbing these days, but you never know. And then you got, next one is operating overhead. You got your legal, permits, all this fun stuff. Now, if you're a small time, this isn't very big. And more importantly, this will be broken up over all your wells. So if your phone bill, I think I pay $55 a month with AT&T for my phone. So if you got 100 wells, you figure 100 wells divided by $55 a month. I don't even know what that comes out to, but that's basically how you would do that on this. Same with your insurance, all that fun stuff. Recompletion and recondition. Hopefully you don't have to mess with this too much. As earlier, if you don't have an in-house workover pull rig, like most of this stuff won't apply to you. You'll just have workover costs and those things. Location cleanup and damages, it's always, they're going to make a mess, so you're going to have to clean it up a little bit, but it's never nothing crazy. And then here's your rig workover cost. They are going up in prices. Big pull rig last year was about $175 an hour. Now you're probably looking at $250 to $300, and before long it'll probably get into the $450 range an hour. Just keep that in mind. All this stuff here is getting into very complex stuff, but if you ever work on a well and you have to change all this stuff out, you've got it all here where you can list the expense. And always, if it ain't in there, you can just add it in. Like, this is more than anything, is just to get your mind flowing and thinking about all the costs that could be associated. Typically, and we'll scroll back down, typically when you look at an LOS, you don't have a lot of this stuff here. You know, you may go 2 years without having to work over a well, having to pull the tubing out, pull the rods out. So sometimes when you look at an LOS, it's actually pretty clean, and that's a good well. But on the flip side, if it hasn't been pulled in a while, you know your days are numbered, and you're probably gonna have to pull it soon. So catch 22. Where were we at here? Workovers, yeah. Again, you have all the vacuum truck and all this stuff. If you're not doing a bunch of stuff on your wells, you really don't have to worry about this. But I like to keep all this stuff in. That way I can itemize every little thing. Talk with your accountant. A lot of this stuff, I believe, you can get good tax write-offs on. Then your lease carrying cost. You got your rentals, all that fun stuff here. Then you got your seismic consulting, data purchase, logs, maps. Like, you really, unless you're looking to drill or do something wild, typically these costs don't come in. There's exceptions to the rule, obviously. If you want to run seismic, if you think you got something down below, then this stuff. But in general, you don't mess with this stuff. And then with all this crap up here, you can get your direct lifting cost per barrel. So all that, if your well makes 10 barrels a day, 30 days, that's 300 barrels. So whatever you got for 300 barrels, and you take all of the costs and you figure out, I'm not going to go into that, that's too much math this morning, but you figure out what your cost per barrel that month was. So January, February, March, April, you get the idea. Again, email me, theoilmutt@gmail.com, and I'll send this over to you and you can go through it. But that's pretty well what an LOS looks like. And whenever you get an LOS from an operator, if you're looking to buy wells, you always want to get electricity bills, copy of the electricity bills, and a bunch of other stuff. We have a workshop coming up in October in the Dallas area. It will be free to attend. We're going to go over chemical, pumping units, electricity, titles, all kinds of fun stuff. But stay tuned for that, and we'll keep in touch. That is all for now. Please like and subscribe, and have a great day.